through queer eyes. We have a really, really great program today. And so I'm excited to be introducing it. First, I'll just mention that I am the host of Family Pictures USA, a television series that had its premiere last year on PBS and still actually broadcasting on PBS, various PBS stations across the country. And we're gathered here today to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Vintage Families of Value, a film I made in 1995. And it's the first film where I employed community storytelling strategies that ultimately led to my series, Family Pictures USA. So we have some special guests, including Shari Frilot, Chief Curator at the Sundance Film Festival, and Rajendra Roy, who is the Chief Curator of Film at MoMA, and others, some really great folks who are going to come and share some family photographs and stories after we speak. I'd first of all like to thank our sponsors and partners of the National Endowment for the Arts, Third World Newsreel, Black Public Media, Buy.org, the Documentary Forum at CCNY, NewFest, Queer Art Film, Reverie TV, Sisters in Cinema, and Visual Aids for helping to make this event possible. So Vintage is actually streaming the full-length film right now on the Family Pictures USA YouTube channel, and so you can check it out there. It's going to be streaming for 2 days. But right now, I am going to show a trailer before we begin our conversation. Roll trailer. I should also have a disclaimer that this is our first StreamYard, so please bear with us.
I was upset when I first found out you were gay, because I was, of the future that I thought that it held for you, in terms of permanent relationships and society and so forth and so on. In other words, once I found out you were gay, I adjusted to that, and when I found out, not that I found out, I always knew Lyle may have been gay, but, sort of borderline. Well, I'm saying that, both of you could have been either way.
Well, you were saying the way you said, because I was too aggressive, too managed, too long time ago, yo.
Yes, I was. What it was that I was trying to make you me. I felt that you could have done a lot more and could have gotten a lot farther if you had at least put that in. How can I put it? If you put it up a facade.
So welcome back. That was a little trailer from Third World Newsreel about Vintage Families of Value. And now I'd like to invite our special guest. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Shari Frilot is an artist, filmmaker, and chief curator of the Sundance Film Festival's New Frontier, a program highlighting work that expands cinema culture through the convergence of film, art, and new technology. And her full bio will be put into our Facebook group chat, so check it out there. And Rajendra Roy is the Celeste Bartos Chief Curator of Film at the Museum of Modern Art, where he leads year-round initiatives to exhibit and preserve works from the museum's collection. And again, you can check out his full bio there. So welcome, folks. It's good to see you. I don't think we've gotten together in a long time, but I remember, when I introduced you guys together in '94, and I think it was a year before Vintage, Shari program Vintage at the Mix Festival. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you. You're completing the circle. This is literally the triangle of my life as I see it here on the screen. I don't know if everybody sees a triangle, but you literally introduced me to Shari Frilot, Thomas, when I moved from California to New York in '94. And that was the beginning of my professional life in film and experimental film. And I couldn't be more blessed to be with you. So thank you for gathering us again.
And, you know, that circle, when I was approached to take on Mix, I asked you, Thomas, to do it with me. And you were like, no, I have to make this movie called Vintage. It's about you, which we ended up premiering. So it's really such an amazing old family moment right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, I wish I had gone and programmed Mix with you, but I don't know if I would have finished the film or if I would have like moved out to California and joined the faculty at UCSD and met Raj there, and you know, so it might have disrupted our moment.
I'm so glad you made that movie.
So, you know, I had asked each of you to, you know, just check it out and, you know, just give some, you know, thoughts about the film. You know, I guess before I let you respond to that, you know, it was such a different time back then. Like, you know, when we were making the film, like late 80s, early 90s, you know, the height of the AIDS pandemic. And here we are now, like, you know, 25, you know, years later, at, you know, in the midst of another pandemic. And but things have shifted so much in terms of, you know, there's marriage equality now. There's you know, there is all kinds of, you know, rights that, you know, still need to be protected. And there's also a kind of embrace. And at the same time, we have, you know, trans people who are, you know, being murdered in the street, you know, still, you know, after all this time. So could you, you know, just talk about Vintage and, you know, maybe whatever you want to say about it?
Sure, you want to lead off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was so great to watch that movie again. It's such, you know, it was their first feature effort, and it's so full of energy and music, and it pulses, you know, it radiates that the vitality of the community and the time that it happened, and it was a different time. You know, you feel the struggles that we are now on the other end of, some of them, not all of them, as you've rightly pointed out. That, but you also, you know, you also see that really intense playfulness and creativity, and just like forging your own world with the energy that is coming out of you, that actually got us to the other side of so many struggles. And I just, you know, I'm really grateful that you made that movie. I'm glad that you decided not to do Mix with me, make that movie, because it was just such an important testament. And I'm not sure if I've seen another movie like that, you know, that you know, that takes on, you know, the families, queer Black families in a form that really meets the spirit of world creation, you know, and world building. And it's just a beautiful film, and all the characters are so vibrant. I just, you know, so great to go back to it and feel, you know, feel them in my history, and in the world that I get to live in, you know, because of that time that we found we were crazy enough to take it on, you know.
So to follow on that, I mean, in rewatching it, I mean, it brought so much back, but what it really brought home to me now, especially, was how radical it was. Not only to tell the story of Black lives in such an intimate method. I mean, and I want to talk about the aesthetics and the methods that you use that created that intimacy or invited that intimacy. But I was also thinking, you know, it was beyond that. It was about it was a portrait of queer lives, of queer family lives, that a lot of people even today don't recognize how different it is to be a gay sibling, a queer sibling, trans sibling in a family unit. And, you know, there's sibling rivalry, which exists in every, you know, situation. But then there's queer family rivalry, right? and those, and also queer family nurturing. And it's very different than hetero, family nurturing. And especially, I mean, I'll point out you and Lyle, in particular, and I think Lyle might even be watching because he posted about it on his Instagram, but hey, Lyle, if you're watching. But, exposing your own, obviously your caring and your love for each other, but also the rivalry and the real injury that each of your queerness placed on each other. And that is so unique. And I feel like people haven't even begun to explore that at this point, in depth, the way that you did. Talk maybe just a little bit about your intimidation or if you had any about exposing that at the time, or were you just so young it was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it,
Yeah, thank you both for those comments. I think that, it feels like all of a sudden, okay, I have to be, it's like, to be really, forthcoming and honest. It's like, I hadn't anticipated, that in terms of starting with the question about me and Lyle. It's, I mean, what was interesting about it, we had, for people who watch the film, I won't give it away, but, there was an incident that happened, that I reveal later in the film that prompted me to begin recording Lyle and then passing the camera off to him and allowing him to record me, and so that happened starting in '89 with this particular incident, and at that time, we were very young, both in our early 20s. Lyle had, I think, when we started filming, he hadn't started art school yet. I was working in public television. And I think Shari and I were working there together during that time. And so, over the course of the 5 years of us filming each other, we went through a lot of different kind of spaces. Lyle graduated from, art school, had his first major show, and it was very successful. And also, we just navigated, we were navigating our families and becoming more mature. And, at some point, I think it was maybe 3 years into the film, we decided to go into couples counseling together.
Wow.
And so we really were starting to deal with this kind of, this issues that were keeping us from moving forward in terms of our relationships. And it gave us this other kind of grounding. And it's impacted in the film. And part of the reason I wanted to invite other people to be part of this journey is because from very early on, we kind of, particularly when we were a little older, we did not have to find our identities outside of our family because we had another queer sibling in that space. So we could actually put together a space right there in the center of the family and claim the space, and everything was operating from that space. And so I wanted to find out, well, how was that situation in other family groups and dynamics, particularly with, all women or, brother and sister. And so that's why I decided to open and really kind of find other sibling groups. And I started interviewing all these different people. We put ads in the Village Voice because this is before the internet, right? And, people thought I was trying to find a hookup, looking for a queer sibling groups, and so
that didn't happen too. Come on now.
What did you say?
That might have happened a little bit too.
But what happened is as I started talking about this within my community, I started realizing that a lot of my friends had queer friends had siblings who were also queer. And so all of a sudden that networking, produced the realization that Annie Cammett had two sisters, who were involved with women. And then Paul, who's Paul Edie, Greg Gray, who's a friend of ours, said, well, Paul's sister is queer. And so I reached out to them, and I told them it was going to be a journey, I was going to give them the cameras, train them how to interview one another. And I wasn't sure what the form of the film would take, but I did know that, to Shari's point around the play, that I was going to invite them to play with me. Both in terms of the structure of the interviews and also the kind of stuff we shot in Super 8, the kind of family the kind of fantasy scenes, and which they Paul choreographed his, and put his sister in a wedding dress, and she's like, even to this day, she's like, I cannot believe you got me. I was fighting dresses all my life, and you got me in a wedding dress, and we just reconnected just a couple of days ago, and she's like, the only thing I can remember about the film is in that dress. I can't. So it was that sense of play also, I could talk about this later, also informed the way in which ultimately I came to put the piece together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so interesting how the film, because back at that time, I remember, the family was the constructed family, the family that you chose as gay people because you didn't have them at home, right? So you went to the bar and this movie came out, and it didn't leave that behind, but it also brought in another kind of conversation about family, queer family inside of the family structure. And, the way that you were able to pull off with that playfulness, it's just so vulnerable and generous, this film. The characters really are able to be very revealing and ask hard questions and stand in front of each other and even in front of the camera in like awkward moments, it's so heartwarming when I think about the feeling of watching this movie right now versus some of the like television, some of the more, like crossover stuff. That play is way more genuine than the performance of normativity. This like the success of, this of gay identity and gay representation on the landscape, the media landscape. Of course, there's inequities of that, but it looks really different now than it did before, but it rarely feels like what this film feels like. And I really appreciated how it not having to struggle with the concept of normativity and what's normal, and really like reveling in the awkwardness and the genuineness and the real heart shots that were coming out of some of the scenes in this film, and that you got to it through play, you got through it through like creating this space through play to be able to get to that. And it's I want to see more movies like that. I want them to come back. I want the 90s to come back.
It's interesting as you're describing it, Shari, it made me realize that part of the ability to do that was because I worked with like home movie format. Like I had that high 8 camera, which had just come out in 91, and you and I were actually shooting on that, at that time. And then Super 8, which is so easy. Both of those formats are so easy to shoot. So I could like, give the camera and then maybe a tripod, to the sisters or to the brother and sister, and it just basically helped set them up. And then they could like do their thing, and I don't think I think now you could possibly do that with like an iPhone camera or Samsung camera, a phone camera, have that intimacy. But if I had, thought about this in terms of, the way in which people are shooting now, like, with these, certain cameras, which you can't necessarily, train someone on in 5 minutes, and allow them to have the flexibility to like, just do their thing. I don't know if I would have that, but maybe not. I don't know.
I really thought about like how, once again, how ahead of the curve you were. I mean, MoMA has finally done an exhibition on home movies and the amateur film aesthetic, and it was on view, but now there's a virtual exhibition on it. But you really pioneered that. But it's not just that it's fun and easy. It also, to my mind, creates a very quick stream into intimacy and familiarity, right? Everybody at that era certainly knew about home movies. If your family didn't make them themselves, you had seen them, that other people had made. So, and it's a more egalitarian form of image making, right? The accessibility was available to, you still basically had to be middle class, but if you were middle class, it didn't matter if you were Black, Asian, white, whatever, your family was probably making a home movie of some sort. And your choice not only to leverage that through found home movies, but also to recreate it then in the fantasy sequences, I thought, in coming back to it now, especially, that's an antique format, right? Like very few folks are shooting Super 8 home movies, but you chose it very explicitly. And again, it's not just that it was familiar and easy, it's also precious, right? When you shot a roll of Super 8 film back in the day, you had 8 minutes or whatever that roll was. You couldn't just keep shooting. So you shot things that were precious, right, to your life, those moments. And so when you're frolicking in the ocean or on the beach with Lyle or, what have you, you knew that you were sharing with us something precious, whether it was created or not, for the film. And I thought that was a really magic and brilliant solution on your part in telling this intimate story. Can you talk about how did you decide to shoot those fantasy sequences in Super 8, for example?
Yeah, I had I actually worked down the hall when I was at WNET from Kara Mertes, who was programming at that time another independent lens, like the local independent lens. And she was doing a lot of experimental stuff and Sue Friedrich's work, Alan Berliner's, Camille Billups, Philip Mallory Jones. And so, in some ways, even though I didn't go to film school, I did do the Whitney Independent Study Program after I left WNET. I had this kind of engagement with this avant-garde work, in the building of WNET 13, with this pal, and so and it was relief because I was doing public affairs shows, and so there was this format you had to maintain. There was also a certain invisibility of the author, you had to assume. And at the same time, I was seeing this other stuff that was happening. And so I felt really drawn to it. And what I didn't realize at the time was that my grandfather had shot tremendous amounts in Super 8 in the 60s and 70s. And I didn't find the full scope of the archive until after my film After Vintage. Amy Akata, That's My Face, when I went to Brazil and I shot, a film I shot on Super 8, all this Brazilian material, and gave the cameras to the Brazilian folks, and they shot me and shot each other. And I came back and I had to kind of figure out the narrative, and it made me think that I had to go and talk about my mom's journey and my grandfather's journey, but I didn't have any images for it, so I sought out the Super 8 and found the Super 8. So I had Super 8 in my DNA, and then I also had a little piece. Before that, in Vintage, I had found a little piece of a Super 8, and there's something, I guess. It's a complicated answer. It's also, I'm legally blind in one eye. And so when I shoot Super 8, it has that kind of flicker thing that happens with the what's it called? The aperture. When you go from, one space to another, all of a sudden things shift and you're not really 100% sure. Sometimes it can be a little bit double. And so I see that way. And so I feel like Super 8 in particular is a way in which I kind of see. I was also intrigued by the idea that I could shoot something in this beautiful format, which at that time there was very little Super 8 sound. So shoot something that would really force people to communicate using their body language and becoming kind of actors in a space.
And it's silent film, almost silent film actors.
Yeah. And so that's what we ended up doing, with all the different siblings to have these moments.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
On the topic of the formality of the film, I was so struck. High 8 at the time was you can go out there and shoot something for the news, but we knew how fragile that format was and how unforgiving it could be. And this movie is just so beautiful. You did a lot of color work, a lot of painting with music and the editing. And I'd love to draw you out a little bit more about, working with what you had, because so little of it felt like just raw footage. You know, you really worked all the different kinds of footage, all the footage into different kinds of feeling, different kinds of aesthetics, and maybe talk a little bit about like how your approach to the look of it, crafting the look of it.
Thank you for that question. You know, I would say that when I first started editing this film, I was trying to, like, I brought that kind of early kind of WNET public TV format. I was trying to, okay, let me explain what's happening with this particular sibling set, and I explain this and explain that, and it was like, okay, and it was just like, it would go out of control. And at one point I realized that, you know, what we're doing is not so much explaining in terms of the you know, the kind of oral storytelling, but that we're actually it's basically painting a mosaic.
It's very painful, actually.
Yeah, of family through this queer lens. And so I would edit something, and I was working with my boyfriend at the time, Christopher Kurt, and who was really helped. Without him, I don't know if I would have finished making this film. And we realized that, like, as we get to a place where the story would just fall off, I then would like look at the Super 8 of the stuff that their stories, the stories that we co-authored, you know, that they said, this actually talks about my relationship with my sibling or with my family. And I would find the solution, the next place to go in that nonverbal material. And it allowed me then to, like, you know, really just fly, you know, because I was able to like construct storytelling in a completely different kind of way. And really have faith and trust in the you know, the kind of form that we set up, you know, in terms of this participatory you know, practice of making this project, you know, and this journey, and that I didn't have to resolve everything, because real life is like, you know, nothing, you know, things aren't resolved. You may get through this moment, you know, but then, yeah, it may reappear, you know, or, you know, and so, so that was very important to do. And then I worked with a lot with a couple of different composers, but primarily Vernon Reid, who's, you know, Black Rock Coalition founder, and we actually worked in many films since then. But it allowed me to really, like, you know, we had dialogues around the sense of play, and I kind of played also with the sound, and, you know, so I took once I entered into the space of the mythopoetic with this film, then I felt like in the edit studio, it was about, I returned to the sense of play, and that allowed me to really to, you know, create that project. And I don't know if I've been as playful since then, you know, in projects. Like, I showed it to one of my students, and they're like, why did you show this to me before? You know,
in this moment that you're, you know, embracing and celebrating this milestone of this film, do you feel a call, or do you feel an impact or draw? Does it beckon you to augment your practice in any way?
Yeah, I feel like I want to go back to a certain purity. I mean, I did, like, in 12 Disciples of Nelson Mandela, I once again used actors to kind of like recreate a kind of narrative that I used similar techniques in terms of that advancing the story, their interpretation of this history that they were a part of but weren't alive for. I do feel like, to a certain degree, like when I watch fictional kinds of projects, I feel like there's a, you know, unless they're like stylized, you know, and there's a self-consciousness around them, they could feel canned, you know, this idea of reality, you know. And so I'm thinking, well, how do, you know, as I move into the space of, you know, developing some fictional projects, how to create something that actually has some of this authenticity, you know, that has some of this, you know, skin in the game, you know, in terms of all of us around, and the sense of play and a little bit of rough edge. Like how do we navigate the rough edges, or bring them in and frame them in a particular kind of way, and thinking about different visual art projects that that I'm familiar with as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like your practice with family pictures also has embraced that to a certain extent, right? The immediacy, the realness, the authenticity of the family memories and the stories that are unearthed there. Maybe you could kind of link up what's happening with family pictures, and also, I mean, clearly, your investigation of your mom, this iron woman of your life, who I've been a fan of hers for 25 years, right? And then the confrontation with your dad. I mean, those are visceral moments that are pure cinema, right? They're just that's what that is. I mean, for you, it's your personal story. For us as an audience, it's the thing that you're just on the edge of your seat. But those are all told through real, authentic moments that you kind of are still helping other people sort through when they go through their family photos.
Yeah. My mom is probably watching this right now. So hi, Mom. And I asked her if she had something that she wanted to say, and she said, I didn't know. Why do you have me on there looking like a monkey? I didn't know you were gonna photograph me with that face mask.
Would you make that choice these days? Would you make that choice? Because it was like, ooh.
It was a moment where we were all gathered and we were focused in the kitchen, doing something where people were there, and then Laya was willing, and it was it was just it captured the moment, and at that time we regularly did, sometimes did face masks together, especially on vacation, but this happened to be in my mom's kitchen. And but I think I don't know. I mean, she says that. I wonder. I think she also likes the fact that she's a big fan of the film. But she did say that. So I quoted your mom. And my father, who died 2 years ago, has been a kind of in some of the personal films, has been a a figure in the film that that was characterized by a certain sense of longing, a certain mystery, a certain unknowingness, that that I'm sure is still with me, and it's a big narrative. It's a big story. So I think that having done this intense work, within my own family, my siblings, but also with the extended family, because I feel like these folks, Annie, Anita, Adrian, Paul, and Vanessa are extended family, as well as other people who were part of the film. It helped me understand the complexity of familial relationships, because I had to go so deep, to become free enough to actually play in the edit room. I had to really and I also gave cuts to people. I gave cuts to each of the people in the film, and they actually not only spoke about themselves, but their, other families, and so it was very kind of, it was an open edit room, challenging, but rewarding. And so I think that in terms of the series Family Pictures USA, where we go to a town and we invite 100 people or so to come and share their family photographs, and out of that we kind of tell the story of this particular region or city, Detroit, for instance, through people who had left and came back, or people who stayed, multiracial, folks. And so, it's interesting that the connection between this film, which has such specificity around Black queerness, and, this other story of the Family Pictures, which has in each episode, it has a Native American major story, it has a Latino major story, it has a Black major story, European American story, Asian story. So it has this whole kind of rainbow of all of us and how we together kind of made this place, and are making this place as well through the family album. And people come, the other aspect is that they come and they have to trust us. And I think that, just the energy, like creating a sacred space, and that's, something that is, for me, is very important in terms of storytelling, that, to be protective, as opposed to, let's say, like set one sibling against another or one person against another. There are other ways of actually telling stories that build and have tension, and, and without this kind of base, kind of easy way of like accelerating, a narrative. And
that's really interesting. I'm sure you're aware of, in the documentary world, there is a strong trend around co-creation, and like, how does a documentarian make a movie about a community that they're not a part of, right? And you're kind of touching a little bit on some of that, but it occurs to me there's such a distinction between being a part of the community and the movies that come from inside of it, and these kinds of co-creation type productions. And there's something that you just said that made me think, oh, well, this is why it's different. And that is to say, there is a difference between creating a narrative of characters and creating with those characters the world that you're living in it through the movie, through the existence, like conjuring the movie as another thing that happens in the world that becomes the world. And I'm very aware that you're doing that with vintage. It's I'm just curious to know, like, how do you bring forward, or how do these kinds of perspectives in engaging with communities, like different kinds of communities and family pictures, how does that play out for you as you carry your practice forward? Because it feels so consistent, and I just think it would be useful to hear. And for you to say something as this culture of co-creation is really struggling to form itself.
Yeah, I think I have to really like work at being honest with myself, in terms of whether it's through journaling, being honest with myself, and also transparent with others. And making the intimacy in the communication, like foregrounding that's the most important thing. Because I am asking people to really talk about intimate stuff. When people bring me a photograph, they come thinking they're going to bring it with a story. It's a story they're thinking about here. Mm-hmm. But the minute they hold up an image, to people who are not their family members, for some reason their heart starts to speak, or we create a space for their heart to speak. And sometimes they're the same story, sometimes they're different stories. And we capture, that moment, of the different, we lost Raj for a second. Hopefully
he'll come back.
Yeah, we capture that moment. And so, it is, there's a level of trust. I don't know if people realize when they come to work with our family pictures. Welcome back, Raj.
Big thunderstorm happening here, so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I don't know if they know when they come with a photograph that they're going to be as vulnerable as when they leave. And so that process, we actually go through a process with them and journey with them with their family album. But I do have to say that, I had to really, I have my own politics, but I really have to say my concern, my care is for the people who are bringing their stories with me. I cannot, like one guy brought this, an ancestor who was Confederate. He's like, I guess I should be sharing this here. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. It's like, to actually talk about the truth behind it, and it's because it's a story within other stories.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. You make it a part of the story, which is not everybody does that. And that scene in Vintage, Miss T and Tulum. I don't know if anybody else would have even considered that a scene. But because the conversation of Miss T, Tulum, the camera, everybody was such a part of what that was. It was such a great scene, and I think you are getting to something quite important in that the process is as much of the story, the narrative that you're trying to construct, and it really comes through, in the final cut.
Speaking of care for work, I wonder if we could just go back in time a little bit. And I'm trying to remember the premiere of Vintage at Mix, right? Because Shari invited, was it opening night, closing night?
I think it was opening night, wasn't it?
I think it was opening night.
Yeah.
And I was working for Shari at that point. But yeah, can we go back to that moment and launching this baby into the world? Shari.
Well, I have to say, my grandmother and grandfather were in the audience.
Oh my God.
You know, and I don't even know, like, I mean, I never had the conversation with them. I never said, you know, I'm queer, you know, I don't think Lala's ever said, I mean, we just were, you know, and we just were, you know, and you know, brought Miguel, my boyfriend at the time there, and, you know, I mean, it was just, we were, and so it was just great to have them there, and, you know, it was just amazing, you know, amazing to have them there, and it was, all the sisters were there, the brother and sister were there. I felt like so, you know, it was amazing. I was living in California. I came back for it. You know, we had just come from, it made its world premiere at Toronto, the Toronto Film Festival, you know, under Cameron Bailey's inaugural Planet Africa program. So brilliant. Thank you, Cameron.
Right.
And then it went to Mix. And I have to say that, you know, Mix, you know, is kind of like a, you know, LGBT, but also when Shari was there, you know, person, and you guys were there, Person of Color Festival, you know, but after that, you know, the film did not actually play at a Black American Film Festival until 2006, 11 years after it was made. Wow. And people would say to me when they gave the film back, are you trying to say all Black families are gay? You know, and so what I realized is that, or they said, you know, because Marlon, I think Black Is, Black Ain't was in circulation, so they didn't want to have more than one gay filmmaker, because that isn't necessarily even, you know, gay. I mean, it's gay, but it's not gay. So I think that part of it was because I didn't position queers as kind of like a problem or as anormal. We actually were starting, you know, as both of you had referenced, you know, starting with a centrality. And, you know, and that I think really kept the film from, like, you know, I mean, when I made my next film, Amy Akata, That's My Face, a lot of people actually thought that that was my first film because there had been, you know, there was some pushback, you know, particularly in America around vintage families of value. It was shown at FESPACO, which is a Pan-African Film Festival, and it was up for, you know, an award there, and, you know, a bunch of other places in Europe and all these different places, and Canada in particular. But in America, there was a way in which there was like a little bit of resistance, you know, and yeah, because it was also at that time, even in LGBT film festivals, it was like the lesbian films and the gay films. You know, the men and women were not in the same program. So, you know, people thought, oh my God, it might be a little bit difficult to program because you have, like, you know, you're mixing not genres, but genders, you know. And so, yeah.
Oh gosh, I remember trying to get the film for Mix. I remember that moment, and this was before you heard from Toronto, and you're like, I'm just gonna, like, you know, shopping around to other festivals, like, how dare you?
I did that.
Oh, Diva. Oh, you don't remember Diva, Thomas? Oh,
I do remember that part. Yeah, I was like, oh, how dare you? You know, you are gonna like make the film, and then I'm gonna do this festival so that I can make sure that you have a place for the film. I'm gonna invite the film and be like, oh well, hold on. In the end, I was a young program and I understand what you were doing, but there was that moment as well. There was that moment of heartbreak as well. But in the end, and especially now that you've talked, you know, about really what happened after that, you know, it was all about context. It's a really different context. And you've always taken very great care of your thoughtful care about how you build career and platforms for your work, and it really. You have a very unique path through the world as an artist in your practice, and the way that your films get out. It's but yeah, did want to
keep it real.
Keeping it real. Sorry, thank you for forgiving me for that.
We've gone back and forth on that anyway, throughout the career as well.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning it too. Yeah.
It's such an amazing thing to be on this path with you, Thomas and Raj. You know, this world that we get to live in right now. To go back and think about this film 25 years later, what a life it's been. Mm-hmm. And we can do that and think about it in this global pandemic and feel the radiance of what this whole thing is about. You know, mm-hmm. It's really quite special.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations, Thomas.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. Well, again, thank you both. I mean, I hold you both dear to my heart, and your amazing work, which has opened up so many paths, you know, to so many different filmmakers and artists, and you know, formats, and you know, institutionally. So, thank you as well. And I hope you'll stay around for on our Family Pictures USA Facebook group and check out the upcoming community photo share that we're doing with friends and colleagues and filmmakers and artists and authors and scholars. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a little piece of Family Pictures USA. It's a non-traditional family in Durham, North Carolina, who is part of our Family Pictures USA North Carolina episode. So get ready to roll that clip and say goodbye, and thank you to Shari and Raj. And it's about 2 minutes, and then we'll come back with special guests. Sound. 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 Social justice.
When we got started, the purpose was to create a space in nightlife where people have not felt safe before, but instead now feel safe. And we've been successful in that. We wanted to build a space where race, gender, size, presentation, regardless of who you are, you felt safe, welcomed, supported.
Hi, we're gonna start it over because we had a little glitch. So we're gonna start it over. Family Pictures USA. Once you see America through Family Pictures, you'll never see this country the same way again. In downtown Durham, I meet a pioneering family of drag performers, the House of Cox, for a photo share at the home of Justin Clark.
House of Cox is their house. Yes, it is the House of Cox, all puns intended. And I am definitely the matriarch, and we've worked really hard over the past few years to build it up and really do some social justice drag in Durham, and to eventually take over the world.
So, where did social justice drag?
When we got started, the purpose was to create a space in nightlife where people have not felt safe before, but instead now feel safe. And we've been successful in that. We wanted to build a space where race, gender, size, presentation, regardless of who you are, you felt safe, welcomed, supported.
Bam.
So this is Vivica. This is her at Pride this past year, but it also marks a shift in Pride in North Carolina where it became more intersectional and accessible. In the past, there are communities that just didn't feel like they were welcomed at Pride, and I was given the opportunity to be the chair at Pride Durham NC. This photo was taken at the point in the festival when I was hanging out with the House of Cops. So it wasn't just taken at any random moment, but I was surrounded by my family. My mom was there, she was on the float with us, and it was just really almost like a lioness looking at her kingdom, and just being really proud of everything that was happening, and it felt really good.
I can tell it's emotional.
It is. All of these photos are going to run the risk of making me cry, and I'm just like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Thomas Allen Harris, host of Family Pictures USA, and we have some special guests that we'd like to bring on. And the first guest is someone I've known a very long time, Yvonne Robin. Welcome. Yvonne Robin is an independent filmmaker, scholar, producer, screenwriter based in Chicago. Her films include Living with Pride, Ruth Ellis at 100, Sisters in Cinema, the name of her organization as well, and Monique, and earlier film Monique. Welcome, Yvonne. How are you?
I'm so delighted to be here. I really enjoyed the conversation I just heard with Shari and Raj before. It was really quite lovely.
Thank you, thank you. So you were part of that group in the 80s and 90s as well. That was touring. I think we met at a film festival back then, an LGBT festival, and I think the picture you sent looks. I think the picture you sent was a picture of you during that time. Can we see that photograph?
Yeah, I hadn't met you yet. This is from the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And even though this just seems like a normal family portrait with my mom and my siblings, it's unusual because my mom is in the picture. My mother never takes pictures. And so that's why it's kind of special. It's early 80s and it marks a moment, like when we were all just beginning to become who we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
And your siblings, are any of your siblings queer?
No, well, my sister is a has-been.
Is it what?
Has-been.
Okay, has-been. Okay.
She was a lesbian for like 3 years. So
Okay.
she became a has-been.
Okay, great. So let's actually see. And so when you look at this photograph, what does it make you think about in terms of where you were in your life, thinking about it from this vantage point?
Well, I was living in Taiwan in the late 80s. So this was me coming home for Christmas. You can see we all dressed like in winter clothing. My little sister with her little salt and pepper, like little flip on the side, was in college. That was the year that my brother, who was a record producer, he produced a song called Promised Land, which is a house music classic song. But he didn't know, I think then, when he made the song, that it would be a classic today. And my sister at the time, on the far end, next to my brother, she was working on her PhD in English literature, writing about Toni Morrison before Toni Morrison was Toni Morrison. But she knew that she needed to be part of her dissertation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you have two PhDs in your family.
Yeah. My sister, the one that's next to me, she's working on hers now, so she'll have one too.
Okay, great. So here, let's go to the next photograph.
So that's Ruth Ellis, and I made this documentary called Living with Pride, Ruth Ellis at 100, and it's the same photo that's on the cover
of the video.
I just loved this picture of her because she kind of looks gay in this picture to me, and a lot of the other pictures didn't really give that off. And also, it's just a lovely portrait. She's probably in her 50s around this time, maybe around my age, right? And I don't know. It's just I just loved this picture, and it just became something that we use for our postcards and promotional materials. And what's beautiful about Ruth Ellis, if you don't know who she is, when I met her, she was the oldest out African American lesbian known. And when I met her, she was 97. She was about to be 98. And I decided to make a film commemorating her birthday. And if she was still alive, her birthday would be tomorrow. And she would be 121.
Whoa. Wow. Someone posted on Facebook, Ruth, Detroit Pride.
Yeah, and you know, the Ruth Ellis Center is having a screening of the film tomorrow, a free screening of Living with Pride, Ruth Ellis at 100. It's at 3:00. And if you go to the Ruth Ellis.
Can we go to the next picture, please?
Oh.
Okay, yeah, so this is Ruth when she's close to, like, in the film, right? 90,
Yeah,
she's in her
well, yeah, we wanted to have a photo so you could see what it looked like to be a 100-year-old Black lesbian. And that's like, we use that on the back of the cover of the DVD.
And so tomorrow, so people who are in Detroit tomorrow can see the film?
Oh, it's online. So I think if you go to the Ruth Ellis Center, you can log in, and it's the way to celebrate her birthday tomorrow.
Okay, so go to Ruth Ellis Center tomorrow online and see Yvonne Robin's wonderful film. I love that film. And I also love the recreations that you do in the film, you know, which actually, you know, as I was talking about some of the, you know, working with actors, I recall, you know, your own strategy as well.
Yeah.
Yvonne, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We got to do some more, but thank you so much for being a part of this, making a queer family album.
Thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the show.
Okay. Bye-bye. So next we have PJ Raval. And PJ Raval is an award-winning filmmaker as well, Filipino-American filmmaker whose work explores the overlooked subculture and identity of marginalized LGBTQ folks. And I met PJ, I met you, I think, when you were 18 or 19. You were one of my first students when I first started teaching at UCSD.
That is true. I mean, it has been some time.
Yeah, and so it's just been amazing to follow your career, you know, and watch these wonderful films that, you know, explore so many different sides of, you know, our community. So I want to start with your first photograph, which I think was taken outside of this country. Shall we go to PJ's image?
Yeah, so this is actually a photo of my parents on their wedding day. And my parents are both, you know, from the Philippines, born and raised in the Philippines, but they met in New York City. So from my understanding, this photograph was taken somewhere, I think in Queens. Yeah, and what I love about this photograph is I remember seeing it once when I was a kid, and I didn't really think much of it, but now as an adult, looking at it, it makes me really think about my parents, you know, being young immigrants here in the United States, and, you know, my mom's in a mini skirt, you know, my dad looks really happy. I don't know who's around them, you know, so there's something for me really magical about this photograph, because I almost look at it and think about, like, wow, in contemporary terms, like, these are people that I could have been friends with. You know, this is something that you know, people that I could probably relate to. But as a child, you know, it just seems so far off in its kind of, you know, conception of where this photograph was taken.
And let's go to the next photograph. So you grew up with these photographs in an album, PJ, or what?
Yeah, so, you know, so the previous photograph I had only seen once or twice, and I think it was somewhere in a photo album that my sister actually has. And then this photograph my sister gave to me, and I remember it used to be hanging in our hallway somewhere, which is why you can see the circle around it is from where it was faded. And I actually have the original here. And I didn't pull this photograph out for many years, but I always kind of knew, for whatever reason, looking at it, it made me think about, it made me think that maybe it was taken at an airport or something. And there's something about it that always makes me think of kind of just the family unit, right? Like, it was a lot of my childhood memories are about being with my mother, with my sister. My dad was a workaholic. He was always at work. But just, you know, for this, pulling it out and looking at the back, it actually says Narita Airport, Japan, which makes me realize this was taken at an airport. And I think it's actually the first time I was going to the Philippines. So my family was probably flying to the Philippines, and there was a layover in Narita. And my guess is my dad probably took this photograph, which I never have thought about or never even asked if that's the case. So it now actually has a different kind of meaning and value to me in a strange way. So yeah,
I love that. I love that discovery. And see, the analog, the great thing about having an analog or print photograph is that you have a lot more information. You know,
yeah.
But let's actually go to the next photograph.
Sure.
Okay.
So this is a photograph that was taken on my wedding day, which was last year. I got married. This is my partner, Curran Nault.
What's his name?
Curran Nault.
Uh-huh.
And I love this photograph because a friend took it, and I am clearly ecstatic in this. But thinking about the first photograph that I shared, it really kind of makes me relate back to that photograph. And not to get too personal, but I never really, you know, growing up a queer person of color in the United States, I never really thought about myself getting married to anyone. You know, that wasn't really in what I thought would be my experience here. And yet here we are, right? So I kind of love this photograph in relation to thinking about that photograph of my parents. It makes me wonder if they ever thought that, that I would have a wedding photograph of my own. I certainly didn't think that. So yeah, and so I don't know, there's something there about that relationship which I really love.
And I also love your styling, the matching outfit, which I didn't see at first, but now I totally see it. Okay, let's go to the next and last photograph. Whoa!
Yeah. I love this photograph. This photograph was taken by a good friend of mine who's also a filmmaker, Patrick Bresnan. And these are the ladies of Lafitte's. They are performers at a bar called Robert's Lafitte, and in the center is Robert's Lafitte, Robert Maynor. And Robert owns a bar in Galveston, Texas, which is kind of known as self-proclaimed, actually, the longest running gay bar in the state of Texas. And I made a documentary called Before You Know It, and Robert and all these ladies of Lafitte's were in that documentary. So this photo was taken when we were premiering the film in Galveston. So we were actually just down the street from the bar, and I love that everyone dressed up. And of course, at the moment of like, let's take a photo, they just decided to pick me up and hoist me across. But that bar in particular is really special because it's a place where I think a lot of people who are estranged from their family, largely queer, largely trans, you know, I think it's a lot of people who found a family in this bar space as and I think there's something really magical about that place, really loving about that place. And so I love this photograph because I feel like it reminds me of that. And funny enough, I'm the type of person who has, I think in the process of looking for photographs, I realize I actually have a lot of photographs. I never print them. I never hang them. They're like, you know, digitized or whatever. But this one I actually have. Like like I actually, you know, the friend of mine printed this and put it into a frame. And so it's actually hanging in my living room.
I love it. It certainly deserves it. It certainly deserves pride of place. I love that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, PJ. And I want to tell people you can see PJ's films Before You Know It, about aging in the LGBT community, and also Call Haganda. And you should definitely see them. We're putting PJ and all the other special guests bios in our Facebook group. So check them out. And please follow him and Yvonne and everyone else who's coming.
Thanks
PJ,
for having me.
It's so great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I also have been asked to tell people that they could donate to our project so that we can continue to do this and family pictures as well. So you can donate. There is you could go to our website www.familypicturesusa.com and make a donation. And now that I've said that, we'll go to our next guest, and our next guest is Cecilia Aldarando. And let's call her, hey girl, how are you?
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see your face.
So, Cecilia is an award-winning filmmaker. Her film Memories of a Penitent Heart which I had the pleasure of working on as a consultant and through Firelight Media, a mentor, has just been done amazing work in terms of thinking about AIDS and family secrets and the kinds of, and also personal memory and archives. And yeah, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to see you.
Let's go to your first film. I do want to talk to you about your next film, but let's go to your the first photograph of Cecilia's. Okay, Cecilia, tell us about this image.
Well, it's funny because it's a little bit of a trick picture because, as you know, there's another photograph behind it. I mean, what I can say is that I made this film about my family, and particularly about this uncle that I never knew, the man pictured here. He died when I was 6, and his name was Miguel, and he grew up in Puerto Rico and left Puerto Rico to go to New York to become an actor on Broadway, like so many other people seeking fame and fortune. You know, it's a cliche, but cliches are true. And in this case, as a gay man, he loved the theater. He loved being an actor, director, lots of things. And so he moved to New York, and then but he died when I was only 6 years old and he was 31. So I grew up with this kind of legend of this, like, you know, actor, uncle, kind of larger than life figure. And
let's go to the next photograph, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, the previous photograph, I mean, it's complicated because, as you can see, they're basically the same photograph, but they're two versions of the same photograph. So this particular photograph here was in the possession of my family. The previous photograph was in the possession of my uncle's partner, who disappeared after he died. So my uncle was gay, he was out, he had a partner, and as he was dying of AIDS, there was a lot of conflict in my family around his sexuality. My family is very Catholic, very religious, and basically people didn't really talk about this side of him as I was growing up. And so as part of the project of making the film, I went looking for his partner. And I found him, and he's still alive, living in California. And when I found him, he had the previous photograph. But what's, I think, very telling is that it was cut. So it was essentially a copy of the same photo, but my family had been cut out of it. And so in the film, you can see it's, you know, the film is essentially an attempt to excavate this lost history. And so it becomes this very real kind of archival search in which, you know, you can think of family archives as symptoms sometimes. You know, there's what remains and what's not there, the sort of telling absence. And so that's something that it was so symptomatic to me. So this is another great example of that. The photo on the right is of my grandmother with my uncle. This is when my uncle was in the hospital. And the photo on the left is my uncle's partner, Aquin. And, you know, again, the photo on the right was in my family's archive. The photo on the left was in Aquin's archive. And you can see that they were basically taken on the same day. So you see what survives, what histories survive and what don't. So in you know, in a lot of ways, Memories of a Penitent Heart the film is an attempt to excavate this kind of disappeared queer history that my family, in its, you know, sort of traditional values, just couldn't accommodate and effectively erase. So it's an attempt to kind of make right what's been lost.
Mm-hmm. It's really moving because you also stitch all the people that were kind of separated, you know, upon his death, you know, back together to tell the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know, I think one of the things that can be kind of complicated in these conflicts, which in fact are all too common, is this way in which, you know, well-meaning, loving people like my grandmother can really kind of campaign to exclude somebody. You know, I grew up with a particular idea of my grandmother as a kind of hero of mine. She was actually a kind of moral compass for me. She taught me what it was to be a good person. And then to find this out, you know, many, many years later, I suspected that that there was something wrong and something amiss in the family, but I didn't suspect that my grandmother had sort of effectively erased an entire relationship, which is what happened. And so part of what is interesting in this kind of juxtaposition is, what do you do with the people you love when you find out that they're really imperfect and that they've done things that you don't agree with?
Thank you, Cecilia. I wanna, we have to move on, but I wanted to just mention that you have a new film which was supposed to premiere at Toronto. I'm not Toronto, but Rebecca. And it's now going to have a screening this coming weekend. Yeah. So could you just tell very, very briefly what that film is and where people can see it? And we can even put it up in our Facebook group. And let's go to full screen, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so I made a film about the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. And in many ways, it's a portrait of everyday life. But it's really about how people recover in the face of disaster. And it's kind of really, unfortunately, very timely and relevant to this moment. And we're doing a one-night sneak preview screening on Saturday night, and I can share the details with you and with the Facebook group. Thank you. And Memories of a Penitent Heart is also available on Vimeo if people want to actually see that film. It's out there.
Oh, wonderful! So good to see you. I look forward to catching up more.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's a beautiful project.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So our next guest is E. Patrick Johnson, who I spoke to earlier today, who is a scholar, an artist, a filmmaker, and who was recently appointed dean at Northeastern.
Northwestern.
Northwestern. The dean and a dean designate at the School of Communication at Northwestern University. Sorry, Patrick. Welcome.
Hey, so good to see you.
You too. And I saw Patrick's wonderful film last night about growing up in North Carolina, and it's called Making Sweet Tea, and it's based. It's around his a play that you've been doing, a theater piece that's based on LGBT folks growing up in the South. And it's also a personal film. And it was so wonderful to see that. So we're actually going to start with a personal film, a photograph. So let's go to Patrick's first image.
So I love this picture. I'm 3 here and in a wig. So I always blame my mother for gendering me queer because she just thought, she was doing something cute, but she was giving me my gender accessories. So I am in her wig, 3 years old, standing in front of a stove, which is also apropos because I love to cook and I learned to cook from her. So yeah, I love that. And I'm eating something. I don't know what I'm eating, but it's something fabulous.
And where was this picture stored? Did you find this picture when you were starting to do the research for your film, reconnect with it, or did you grow up with it?
No, I grew up with this picture, but I recently, my mother passed away a year ago. In fact, her funeral was a year ago today.
Wow.
And so going through her things, she had all of these photographs. My mother I call her an archivist. Some people would say hoarding. I say she was an archivist because she kept everything. And she had it labeled. So it was very organized. And so she had all of these photographs of family members, especially her children. But she also had a box with all of the pictures and memorabilia from our lives. So I found letters from her, to her that I had written to her from college. I found my driver's license permit and all of these things. And she had a box for each of her kids.
Wow. I love that. We just did an organizing project on video on our Facebook group, and they say that the best thing to do when you're organizing your materials are put them in boxes and put names on them, and each family, each subject has their own box. So your mom was like, wow, ahead.
Yeah, she was ahead of her time.
Exactly. So now we have another image. And was she also the photographer as well?
No, she wasn't. Well, she was the photographer of that first image, but for this one, she was not, because she's actually in the photo. She's cut out of, but that's part of her shoulder in the picture that's actually leaning over that car, which she nicknamed Tin Lizzie. My mother always named all of her cars. And so this is Tin Lizzie. I love this picture because I'm standing akimbo. I'm age 4 here. So this is around 1971. And that picture is taken at the place where I was born, where I grew up in Hickory, 8th Avenue Drive, 229 8th Avenue Drive, 1-bedroom apartment. And again, my mother is looking over, watching me pose my little akimbo thing here, but it's so queer. I mean, it's just a big old queen. But I learned that pose from her because there's so many pictures of her with that same pose.
That same pose. Wow. You know, as I told you earlier today, I watched your film and it was so heartwarming. And, you know, I've never seen a film that explores queer African American queer identity in the South, you know, both big cities and smaller cities. Like Hickory is a small city, but you know, it's like, and also seeing it through your eyes, you know, was wonderful. It was so inviting.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Thank you for that film.
Shout out to Yvonne, who was a consultant on the film. And it was great to see Shari, because I haven't seen Shari in over 20 years, since the Black Queer Studies in the Millennium Conference in Chapel Hill. So it's like a little homecoming.
Homecoming. Let's go to the next photograph. So this is actually a still from the film, right?
Yeah, so this is a still from the film, and that's Countess Vivian, who at this time is 96. And what he's showing me is a picture from 1946. His picture from the Army. He served in the Army in World War II, and he's pulling out that picture to show me. And he was so handsome. Oh my goodness, he's quite a looker. The Countess lived to be 99 years old and 10 months. He died just 2 months shy of his 100th birthday. But this is taken in the Treme in New Orleans, where he was living at the time. And I loved him. And one of the things that I love about this film too is for me, I still hear the clicking of his index fingernail on the glass of the photo, because he was tapping it as he was showing it to me.
You know, when I started putting this together, I didn't, you know, I reached out to different people, and I had no idea that there would be this theme of documenting gay elders, you know, that with Yvonne's film and PJ's film and your film, you know, and, you know, without this documentation, I mean, we would not have no idea. It's such a, you know, vacuum in terms of their stories. And, you know, each generation, you know, the curse is that each generation of queer, you know, folks, kids, feel like they have to completely, you know, reinvent the wheel, you know, in terms of there's no history, and that's beginning to change with films like this.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I look forward to our next conversation, and congratulations on your recent deanship, and it's really exciting. How are you feeling about it?
Oh, you know, I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but it's all gonna be good. I've been telling people though, I feel like Obama in 08. But it's all good.
You have our prayers and good thoughts.
Thank you, Thomas. All right.
Thank you, Ipati. Bye-bye. So I will just say, again, people can go to our website to donate, to keep our lights on through these challenging times of telling stories which need to be told. Our next guest is someone I've also known. I think I've known her since I was in kind of late teens, a classmate of mine, college classmate of mine, Nancy Cates. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Hi, everyone.
Hey, and where are you dialing in from?
I'm on Cape Cod. Don't tell anyone. I snuck across the country. I guess this is public, but supposed to be California. Don't tell anyone. And I just want to say it's so moving to think about queer family, and I just have to get this out there before I forget to say it. Is like I always wanted a queer sibling, so I'm totally jealous of all you people with queer siblings because of course I have other friends as well who have queer siblings, but it's a very different experience, I imagine. So,
well, should I call you Sister Nancy then?
It looks like we're cousins. I don't know where, I don't know what the delineation, but I think we're in queer cousin land for sure. But
queer cousin.
Very honored.
Cousin Nancy. so we're going to go to your first photograph, which is actually a little bit of a montage of 3 photographs. Let's go to Nancy's image.
So wait, there were supposed to be 2 other ones. So that's my, those are the Cateses. And, I look so like such a dyke in this picture. I mean, it was probably taken, I don't know, 17, 18 years ago. And I just it's like, which one's gay? Not the subtle question. But I was going to kind of contrast this with the next photograph because I realized that queer family for me is extremely different than biological family. And I don't have, kids of my own, but I have chosen family and it's, really important to me and it's very different. So these are some of my friends, some of whom Thomas, and unfortunately, several people in this photograph are no longer with us. But one of the things I was realizing when I was looking for photographs, because I was kind of frantically looking for these before I left California, is that, that queer family is how you define it. It's not necessarily, lots of people have kids now, or, thank God we have marriage equality. But, these people are my queer family. They're not all queer, but they're queer enough. And as a group, they represent a certain kind of family unit. And it just doesn't look like my existing family. So that was why I put these 2 photographs in here. They're not the world's greatest photographs, and I didn't choose them for that reason. I chose them more to try to explain that in a way that we're all part of multiple families as well. Mm-hmm. And we can skip that next photograph if you want, but I also had a picture of my documentary family in Berkeley.
Let's go to that.
Yeah, I think they may have taken it out for time. So this is Byron Rustin, the subject of my film Brother Outsider, which premiered in 2004. And this particular photograph meant a lot to me.
Can I just stop you just for a sec? Do people know who Bayard Rustin is? Does everyone out there know who Bayard Rustin is? Nancy, if you could maybe, before you tell us why you chose this photograph, if you could just give a little bit of a synopsis on who Bayard Rustin is.
Rustin was a gay civil rights leader who started working on racial equality and peace activism in the early 40s. So he did things like, he did a bus protest in 1948. He did sit-ins in restaurants in the early 40s. And, a lot of the stuff that we think about with Rustin is, can we go back to the other photograph, is, we think about, the freedom riders in the 60s. Well, he was doing that, 15 or 20 years before they did. He was a chief advisor to Martin Luther King, and he was, openly gay for the time. It's kind of hard to define open, but certainly people in the movement knew that he was gay. He didn't hide it. I think he quite enjoyed his sexuality. And it was also interesting, just as an aside, being a woman trying to imagine this man's, sexuality. It's if you're a woman trying to imagine what it's like to be a gay man is a little bit beyond, I tried really hard, but anyway, so the reason
it was a great film. It's a beautiful film, powerful. Can we go to the next image?
Did you want to say anything about that film, image? Yes. So I always felt like I had to answer to this guy. He looks kind of annoyed. He looks like, Kate's, get it together, make a good film. When you're making a biography of someone who's dead, they can't really weigh in. But I always felt like I was in relationship to this photograph, that Rustin was kind of like my activist grandfather or something. And if I didn't, he looks kind of a little frustrated right there. And it's like, I had to answer to the sort of not happy Bayard Rustin, who wanted us to make a better film than maybe we thought we could. So that's why this is here.
Wow. Someone said in the Facebook chat, Rustin was part of his also a frat brother, and he was brilliant. And he did guide a lot of the younger folks, including Martin Luther King. Can we go to the next photograph? And also John Lewis, who's actually pictured in this photograph in the center with Bayard Rustin on the left. And so, it was.
So Rustin had been like a young activist and a rebel. He called himself an angelic troublemaker at times. But by the time the March on Washington happened in 1963, he was more of an elder statesman, and John Lewis was the young rebellious person. And John Lewis was asked to tone down his speech for the March on Washington because it was too out there. And that was sort of an interesting dynamic. I think that John Lewis really looked up to Bayard Rustin, but I think he was annoyed that Rustin wanted to kind of like contain him a bit. And there were certain people on the far left in the civil rights movement who felt like the March on Washington wasn't radical enough. But it was the largest demonstration that had ever been held in the history of the United States at that time. And Bayard Rustin organized it. So I also thank you for the opportunity to remember Representative Lewis, who I got to meet a couple of times. It was a great honor.
I did as well. A wonderful honor, and just really, it's a sad loss. Nancy, thank you for the opportunity to share your family album with us, an extended family album. Where can people see your Bayard Rustin film?
I'm supposed to know this. Like, I think it's on Google Play. You can get the DVD on Netflix, but not the streaming. In fact, I'm trying to get Netflix to put it on streaming right now because I think it speaks to this moment. So I don't know if any of you could write to Netflix and ask them to put it back on the streaming service. But if you Google Brother Outsider, The Life of Bayard Rustin, there are a few options. And of course, we have a website, rustin.org, where you could buy a copy. So thank you so much, Thomas. And congratulations on your anniversary of this important film.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
Okay. So our next guest is a journalist and a filmmaker, a writer, Lucina Fisher. Are you there? Oh, so you. And I understand, I was told by E. Patrick Johnson that you guys were in college together for a period of time.
Yes, we were.
Oh, family connections. Extended family.
Totally. Hi, E. Patrick. Hi, Yvonne.
That's right, Yvonne. So we're gonna go to your first photograph, which features some siblings. So tell us who's in this picture, where is this picture taken, and why is this picture important?
Oh, this is a very important picture. This is my brother, Gary Fisher, who was an artist and writer. He is on the left. I am in the middle. And that is my sister, our sister, Leslie Fisher, who is leaning into my shoulder. And this is taken on Gary's birthday on June 19th, 1993. And it was a very special birthday because this was the first time I was seeing Gary after he let us know that he had AIDS. And so I flew out to San Francisco to be with him. He had just come out of the hospital, and he was having a celebration with some of his friends. So I met his friends. They brought him hats because he had lost his hair in getting treatment for Kaposi sarcoma. And somebody had given him a leopard, and that is that stuffed animal that you see in his pocket that I am leaning into. The leopard was sort of like, so he wouldn't feel alone with his spots. And as kids, we always played with stuffed animals. We made up a lot of silly games. Gary was the game master. And I'm sure he was saying something very funny or silly. And so I leaned in to snuggle the stuffed leopard, and I was probably feeling uncomfortable, but was so glad to be there. And yeah, it's a very, very special photograph to me.
Yeah, I just want to also mention that I after Gary's death, and even before I knew you, because we just met with this year, but Gary in Your Pocket, which was produced a book that was posthumously published. Can we go back to the yes? It's Gary in Your Pocket was a book of Gary's writings, which I'm not sure if my brother Lyle Ashton Harris gave me the book or if someone else gave it to me or told me I should get it. But it was just so instrumental in terms of my own finding my own authentic voice, and seeing the importance of, my own writing at that time. And then when you and I were in a panel last month, we realized, I realized that you were siblings. I was like, that book is so important to me. And then it began this whole other dialogue. So I just want to say that I think the book, I'm not sure if it's out of print or in print, but people should definitely check it out. Gary in My Pocket.
Gary in Your Pocket. Yeah, it's
Gary
still
in
in
Your
print, and you can get it on Amazon. I think I saw there were like 6 copies left, but I'm sure they will publish more. And yeah, Gary was instrumental in me finding my voice as well. I love that he's done that for a number of Black gay men, and of the current generation as well. Jeremy O. Harris, the playwright, also considers Gary one of those inspirational voices. But Gary was instrumental in getting me to find my voice and to do something about the AIDS epidemic. He really wanted me to point out that Black families were impacted and how they were impacted, and we just weren't seeing images of them. So he was like, Lucina, you need to do something about this. And, being that he was my big brother, I was like, okay, I will. And I am.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. So let's go to the next photograph. And speaking of finding your voice, you are coming out soon with a new film, Mama Gloria. And so tell us about this photograph.
Well, that is Mama Gloria in the middle. Look at that pose. I love it. That's me on the left, and that's my daughter, Gia. Gia Parr. And I have to thank E. Patrick Johnson, actually, for introducing me to Gloria Allen, who was looking for somebody to help her with her memoir. And when I read about Gloria, I was like, oh my God, she needs to be seen and heard. Let's put this woman in a film. And she loved the idea. And as it were, when E. Patrick reached out, I was heading to Chicago with my daughter. And she was part of this storytelling campaign where she was going to be speaking to some companies on Coming Out Day. My daughter is transgender, and she came out at age 12 in our small town here and has since become sort of a national voice for her generation. And so we traveled to Chicago, and we managed to connect with Gloria. And Gloria spent the day with us. And this was actually on the day that Chicago was unveiling the Marsha P. Johnson plaque on the Legacy Walk. So that's us standing in front of Marsha P. Johnson's image. And it was on that day that Gloria was like, oh yeah, we're doing this film. And for my daughter, this is kind of a gift that I hope to give her. And it's this connection to aging that Gloria provides as a 74-year-old Black trans woman. She came out in the 60s before Stonewall. She was certainly out to her family, and her mother and grandmother were really supportive of her. And that's an important message because I'm supportive of my daughter. And I know that that's in large part because of my brother and growing up with him and in our family and seeing, where he lacked some support from my dad and how that impacted him. So I was certain that if I became a parent, I was going to do something different. And as it turned out, I had to. So Gloria is, she's a gift to me. I feel she's adopted me. She's adopted Gia as her granddaughter. And the film will hopefully be out this fall. We are finishing up the post-production, and we are all so eager for the world to meet Gloria Allen. She is fantastic.
Well, we look forward to helping you get the word out and doing whatever we can do. It's so important. And, this story, and she's so vibrant and so beautiful. I saw the trailer, and so it's very exciting. And it's also just wonderful to see a mom who is, going to bat for her daughter, and, in this, time when so many people, particularly trans people find themselves alone, without their parents, because, gender can be one of the last perhaps one of the last frontiers in terms of people, being accepted. I think in E. Patrick's film, Making Sweet Tea, one of the characters actually talked about that, the mother's resistance to it. So it's just that model is so powerful and so important. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This is such a wonderful, wonderful experience being with everybody and sharing our photo albums. I love it.
Thank you, Lucina. And I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Good luck with finishing. So we are down to our last 3 special guests. Our next special guest is also an old friend. See, I actually, when I realized I was going to do this photo share, initially we were going to do another program, and I realized about a week and a half ago I need to do a family pictures photo share and create a queer album. So I looked through my phone book and saw all the people, and also my Facebook feed, saw all the people that I knew that I wanted to, foreground. And so this next person, someone I've known since the 80s as well, Keith Jamerick. Will you join me?
Hi, Thomas.
Hey!
What an exciting night. This has just been fabulous.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's good to see you. Oh, wow, I'm seeing your home. It's the first time I've seen your home. Now, I used to actually visit you all the time when we lived in Brooklyn. You had this amazing loft. And in fact, in Vintage Families of Value, as you reminded me in a text earlier today, when Paul was doing his dance, it was in Keith's loft in Brooklyn. What part of Brooklyn was that, Keith?
Well, we used to call it Park Slope, but it really wasn't. It's now called Gowanus because we were right on the Gowanus Canal. It was a warehouse district that nobody wanted to go to, but it was the perfect place to land for me. Because that loft became not only my studio and my darkroom where I lived, but it was kind of a community center. We used to have LGBT gay pride parties before they had them anywhere in Brooklyn. We used to have like 500 people dancing in my loft back in the early 80s.
I remember that. I remember those parties. I had a great time. And also the dark room. And I would go and use your dark room. And I think Spike Lee's brother was your roommate, right?
David, yep.
David Lee. And so it was like so funny because I was like meeting David Lee in this context, And that was in like the late 80s. And I haven't seen him in a while. But, let's go to your first photograph.
Okay. I decided to bring this picture up because I have, like Nancy earlier said, I have no gay siblings. I keep searching. There's not a gay person in my lineage anywhere, although I keep hunting. But anyhow, in the late 70s, I was living with my grandmother because my grandfather was dying in the hospital. But I got to snoop through their house and I found boxes and boxes full of old photographs. And my grandfather was a photographer back in the 19-teens. And this is a picture he took of his father, his older brother's baby, and his 2 siblings. There were 13 children in the family outside of Buffalo. And as proof, here's my grandfather's signature on the back of the photograph.
Wow, hold it up. Can you make that screen bigger so we can see that, Josh? Wow. And his signature.
Yeah.
So it was on your paternal side because you have the same name.
Yes, exactly. So, for me, being gay is about looking behind the facade, like what's real behind what I'm looking at. And that's what photography is doing for me. I'm able to discover so much. And my grandfather was actually disassociated from his family because after my great-grandfather died, my grandfather, as the oldest son still living on the farm, was in charge of the family estate. Something happened. He blew it. He lost the farm. And all of the other siblings resented this. And then maybe he was, we really don't know the story, but I never got to know any of his family till after he died. And his living siblings welcomed me into their life. So another reveal.
Wow. I love that story. Were any of them in this picture?
Yes, Louise, the youngest girl in the front, she was still alive.
Wow. I love that story.
My parents got to know her as well. So,
Someone says, wow, the dungarees and the bales of hay, incredible. I thought it was the Midwest when I saw it. Who knew it was Buffalo?
This is upstate New York, and it's a photograph that my grandfather clearly staged.
Mm-hmm.
So he had an artistic bent, which I'm very happy to see.
Well, let's go to the next photograph. This is also a Buffalo photograph.
Yeah, I moved to Brooklyn when I was 30, so I had 30 years of being in Buffalo. And when I was a photo researcher there, I was always snooping around looking for old photographs. And I went into an antique store. I bought an old camera there, but I also was snooping around, and the guy said, well, maybe you would be interested in these photographs. And he pulled out this portfolio from down below. And he said, I can't tell you a thing about these images. I'm only selling them with that agreement because there are people in drag, cross-dressing people in this portfolio. I can sell them to you as they are, but I can't answer any questions. And I said, oh, come on, you've got to tell me something. He said, well, I do know that there were drag parties in these fancy mansions on Delaware Avenue in Buffalo, but that's as much as I can tell you. And this is just one of them. There's more than a dozen pictures of people in drag from the 1920s. And
wow,
it's an ongoing research project, and I'm finding out some interesting things. I found out where one of the balls was held at the Saturn Club on Delaware Avenue. And I found out who the photographer was. And I found out where his studio was. So, if you dig, you can find.
Yeah. Well, as I said to you earlier, when we go to do our family pictures in Buffalo, we have to call you up and get together and see what we could do to flesh out some Buffalo stories.
Buffalo has an amazing photography history, just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
This is just one example.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of talk. There's some talk now of me doing an exhibition at SEPA Gallery.
In Buffalo,
In Buffalo, with these vintage drag photos and with photos related to an upcoming image I'm going to show you.
Let's go to that next image.
Okay. This is Ann Hubbard. I worked on a project with Madeline Davis, who wrote with Elizabeth Kennedy the definitive study of lesbian bar culture, working class lesbian bar culture in Buffalo. It's called Boots of Leather, Slippers of Gold. It's a really important book. But all of the people that they interviewed over 2 decades were not named. So now years later, Madeline and I teamed up, and we went and interviewed who she considered the LGBT political elders in Buffalo. And Anne clearly is one of those people because she organized house parties when the lesbian bars were not exactly friendly to people like her. And plus they were dangerous places, and the police kept raiding. There was a lot of fighting going on, but Anne was just like this lovely, amazing party animal who would raise parties in people's homes where people would stay for days, play cards, drink to their heart's content. And the way that Madeline looks at this is that this is the beginnings of political organizing. It wasn't thought of as political organizing, but it clearly was. And out of that organizing came, years later, and established a group called Shades for Black lesbians in Buffalo. It wasn't supposed to be for Black lesbians, but that's what it became because white people are so uptight. And, so we collected oral histories and photographed these stellar people in Buffalo.
Wow, I love this photograph, and I love her energy, and I cannot wait to see this show, and I hope you bring it to New York as well.
Well, we're going to put it together at SEPA Gallery, where the funding started for Gay Pride next June.
Wonderful. Well, Keith, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for posting some of these images on Facebook so I could find them and rope you into our Queer Family album production. Yeah. And I look forward to following up with you very shortly.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Okay. You too. So our next guest is a very special guest as well. And it's someone who I met 2 or 3 years ago. I teach right now at Yale University, and I met this lovely person, Brittany Bland, when I first went up and spoke at a mutual friend of ours class. And Brittany and I started talking. I asked her to do a blog for me. I joined the faculty at Yale. Brittany took my class and gave me good scores, and then did this amazing MFA project in the School of Theater that used her own family archives. And it was, I mean, something that, you know, all of my colleagues at, you know, at the university are talking about, people outside are talking about. Brittany is this amazing projection artist. And so I just wanted to, just got her MFA. And so, and we've already started working together. So Brittany, let's go welcome.
Hi, Thomas. It's so great to see you, and thank you for inviting me, having me here. This is just absolutely wonderful. I want to get in and just go ahead and start talking about this first image, which I have another one, which is part of that collection, which is of my father and my uncle. They're twin brothers, and this was taken. I mean, it looks like they're probably in their like early 20s here, and it really just, I think, showcase like a beautiful bond and love between two men, which I don't think is very common or normalized in our culture and our society. And these two wonderful people, just, if it wasn't for their own, you know, compassion and love and empathy and respect, you know, I don't think that I would be able to showcase that in my own work. And I think that in their work as both as storytellers, they were wonderful storytellers and also photographers. I actually have another photo here, which is like, you can clearly see my uncle and my father, you know, taking a very like stylized, wonderful shot. You know, I think all of those values that they held really were obvious in the work that they did and the care that they were as parents and as people.
Beautiful, beautiful. And are they still alive today?
Well, my father passed away when I was 19. After suffering a stroke. My uncle is still alive and living in Canada, but he also unfortunately suffered a stroke about 2 years ago. So there's this whole kind of like interesting story about legacy and how we transcend grief that became the center point of my thesis.
And I just want to say, Shari Frilot, who I want to introduce you to, her nephews are twins, and we were just on a birthday party with her maybe a month or two ago, and this photograph reminds me of seeing them and the twinning energy and moving images during that birthday party, Zoom party. Let's go to the next photograph.
Absolutely. So this picture is of me. I have no idea how old I am there, but I chose this photo because of what it shows and also what it doesn't show. When I see this, I see so many, like in my mind, I see so many different versions of myself kind of splintering, you know, from these moments from my childhood and my adolescence and like the present day of like who I am. And I see like this like beautiful, like wonderful child. I'm very, I have the same looks, you know, my entire life, you know, I have kind of the same faces, and it's just really interesting to see that. But I also just see different people, and I'm really interested in trying to continue the storytelling from this moment in my life, because when my father passed away, my father and my uncle were our family's archivists, so to speak. Our families, they really told our stories and archived our photos. So once my father passed away, that process stopped. It kind of stopped there. And I'm really interested in seeing, you know, photos in our family as they are now, you know, moving on from this point from when I was a much younger child and like an adolescent. And that's just really what this photo brings to mind to me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Let's go to the next photo.
So yeah, so this one's kind of dark, but it's actually a photo from my thesis project. So I really, in that year, was going through many things, you know, and one of the major things was trying to like deal with myself, like get myself out there as an artist and a storyteller, and what does that mean to me? And I thought that in order to fully do that, I had to really ground myself in who I was, and I hadn't really dealt with that loss and that memory in a way, and I felt that I was holding on to those memories in like a place of pain and grief, and I wasn't really doing myself, my family, or my father's memory a service by keeping it there. And so I went home, of course, and we could fill like a warehouse with all the photos that we have, and I went through them all of them, and brought back hundreds of photos and went through them and tried to find a story, tried to find my voice in that. And so this project is really the culmination of my time in grad school, finding myself as an artist. I think that there are not many people of color, Black projection designers out there, and so it's hard to see yourself, as that person when you don't see that reflected in that industry. And also finding a way that like your stories, matter, that your voice matters. And so I found that through going back and finding these images and finding my story. And I used an animation copy stand, which is used for mainly like stop animation and things like that. And I live projected myself presenting the photos, and it's projected in a larger format, so you can see me working with my history like literally, and then also watch the movie kind of version of it, the documentary of it happening as well. It just became this really interesting live theatrical documentary-esque performance that was I don't know, it was truly amazing. I interviewed my mother and my uncle, and my mother is actually narrating during this whole process, and I'm kind of going along and laying photos and telling a visual story to go ahead with the auditory one. So yeah, that's my presentation there. But yeah, it was just like truly astounding time and project. I actually had the pleasure of showcasing it to my entire family. Well, most of my family at graduation, the day we graduated, I walked, and then I had an extra surprise for them, and I took them into this room where I'd done my thesis, and I performed it again for them, and it was just a wonderful healing process. I think that we had all kind of locked ourselves in this moment of like grief and not really transcended that. So yeah.
Such a moving story, and also the work is so beautiful and so powerful, and people, as I said, people are still talking about it, and I'm looking forward to your future work. I know you're collaborating with a lot of different folks, including me and our team, and I'm really grateful that you're in our lives, and that and for your work, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next big project that you do as well.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Brittany. So we've come to the end of our program, folks. We've had some amazing folks who have shared their family photographs, and I'm going to say goodbye to Brittany right now. And I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and sharing their photographs and the stories, and kind of adding things to this virtual album that we're creating. I do want to thank also our sponsors for this project, the National Endowment for the Arts, Third World Newsreel, which has been our host, and particularly JT Tagagi, who has just been like, the Uber producer on this event. I'd like to thank Black Public Media, Buy.org, the Documentary Forum at CCNY, NewFest, Queer Art Film, Reverie TV, Sisters in Cinema, and Visual Aids for helping to make this event possible. The film Vintage Families of Value is streaming for you right now on our Family Pictures USA YouTube channel, and it will do so for the next 2 days. And you can also rent it if you're in the academy and use it in classrooms. So you can contact TWN.org. That's Third World Newsreel, TWN.org for educational sales. And, every time you take a step, you never know where it will lead. And so about 2 months ago, we had the idea to do this 25th anniversary event. And out of that, Comcast actually came and decided to do a festival on a queer festival, virtual queer festival in the Beltway. And they decided to use Vintage for the first, program Vintage for the first 2 weeks of that festival. And they also had us get together with several of the families in the film, and we did a panel, Zoom panel discussion on Monday, which they're editing, and it's going to be broadcast on the 30th. So you'll see the folks and get updates from some of the folks in the film. So keep posted on our Family Pictures YouTube, Family Pictures Facebook channel, so we could keep you informed and when you could see that. I also wanted to thank behind the scenes Josh Van Beemer, who is my former student at Yale, who is coordinating the entire event. He's just been amazing. Thank you, Josh. And he also is serving as VJ, the photo VJ. And I'd also like to thank our Family Pictures office coordinator, Quentin Parker, who is behind the scenes dealing with tech and made everything smooth and hosted a lot of the people as they came in to do their tech. So that, I think, is it. I wanted to thank Ian Lawrence for helping to ignite this idea with an email 2 months ago or so, and everyone for being present and for welcoming these folks. If there are any last questions, we'll take them, but it seems like everyone's been making comments and there haven't been any questions, but feel free to join our Facebook group. If you have some ideas for future community photo shares, or you want to think about inviting Family Pictures USA to your town for one of our upcoming episodes, we're planning season 2 right now and deciding on our next 10 cities and or locations, because we also work in rural areas like Southwest Florida and also North Carolina. At various parts of North Carolina, feel free to reach out to us at info@familypicturesusa.com. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. And it's been my pleasure and a joy to spend time with such amazing folks. I'm signing off. Thomas Allen Harris from